Shalom, everybody. This is Jadiel from the Fourth Angels Learning Center. Today, I want to thank you guys for joining our study, our class. And today's class is going to be focused on circumcision, understanding circumcision. So please, do what you have to do. Pray, get the scriptures, have it open, follow along, get your notepad, your pen, your pencil, and let's get right into our class. So, circumcision. So we did a study which is based off of whether or not circumcision is for the foreigner, whether the foreigner should take circumcision in order to observe a feast. I think this is very important, so you can go check out that video if you want to know that question pertaining to the Passover. But this is just pertaining to circumcision as a whole. What does it mean? And where does it come from? And what is it pointing to? What is it a lesson for? What is it teaching us? So first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the beginning aspects of where circumcision was first instituted. And it was first instituted with Abraham in Genesis chapter 17. So let's look at Genesis chapter 17. We're going to look at verse 1 to 8 as well. We're going to read verse 1 to 10. It says, "And when Abraham was 99 years old, Yah appeared to Abraham and said to him, I am El Shaddai, or Elohim Almighty. Walk before me and be thou perfect. I will make my covenant between me and you and will multiply you exceedingly. Abraham fell on his face, and Elohim talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many nations." Now stop right there. We're going to break this down a little bit. So the covenant is that Abraham is going to be made into the father of nations. This covenant is a specific, exclusive promise to Abraham. This is what makes Abraham such an important aspect of the covenant that we enter in, because he is the only one referred to as the father of many nations. Our names are not changed to anything referring to the father of many nations. He is the father of many nations, and we become his seed. We don't become the father of many nations, even though we may have children ourselves. But he himself is in a covenant in which Yah is going to make him the father of many nations. This is one point that shows that this covenant is pointing to a promise that is made to Abraham only. Let's continue to look at this. Verse 5 to 10, it says, "Neither shall your name any more be called Abram, but that your name shall be Abraham, for a father of many nations I have made you. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations from you, and kings shall come out of you." So it's very specific. "I will establish my covenant between me and you and your seed after you in the generations for an everlasting covenant, to be Elohim to you and to your seed after you. I will give unto you and to your seed after you the land wherein you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their Elohim." So again, let's stop there. He then begins to talk about the magnitude of this promise. The magnitude, the father of many nations. Want to make clear this fact that Israel is one nation. The 12 tribes of Israel is not 12 different nations. It is one nation. So Abraham has to be the promise to Abraham was that he will become the father of many nations. And not only that, but that the land of Canaan was for an everlasting possession to him and to his children. The land that he's in there as a stranger, he will possess with his children. It's not that his children will possess this land in some type of indirect fulfillment. No, Abraham himself must receive this promise. And we know for a fact he did not live to possess it as an everlasting possession. So therefore, this is a more broader sense of the covenant between Yah and him directly. Let's continue to look at this. Verse 9 to 10. Elohim said to Abraham, "You shall keep my covenant therefore, you and your seed after you in their generations. And this is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you Your seed after you, every man child among you shall be circumcised. And you shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin. It shall be a token of the covenant between me and you. Everyone in the house. Everyone in the house. Let's look at verse 12. Everyone in the house has to bear the symbol of the covenant between me and you, Yah and Abraham. Look at what it says. Verse 12. He that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man child in your generations. He that is born in the house or bought with money of any foreigner, which is not of your seed, he that is born in your house, and he that is bought with your money, must be circumcised, and my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. And an uncircumcised man child, whose flesh of the foreskin is not circumcised, that soul be cut off from his people, he that have broken my covenant. Now, this principle was reiterated in the Torah in Leviticus chapter 12, verse 3. Now, it's one sentence reiteration. It doesn't mention anything else. But, of course, we have the indicators back in Genesis as to what these things mean. So, in Leviticus chapter 12, verse 3, it simply says, in 8 days old, when a child is 8 days old, they must be circumcised of the flesh of the foreskin. So, I want to point out, the one who is getting circumcised at 8 days old, is this a demonstration of faith for the person that is getting circumcised? The answer is no. The person is 8 days old. They are not cognitive of what they're doing it for, nor who they're worshiping. They are 8 days old. So it's not a matter of faith for the person getting circumcised. It's a matter of faith for the adult remembering the covenant between Abraham and Yah and circumcising their child and basically making aware the promise to the foreigner what Abraham's promise was going to be. So the foreigner, which is a person from a different nation that comes in, has to be circumcised to bear the covenant that was made between Yah and Abraham. Okay? Now, what was the covenant? What was the seed coming was going to bless those afterwards. Now, look at this also, because this is, he gives a broader sense, and he goes far in the future and says that you will have the many nations, kings will come out of you, all of these things. And then look at what he says in Genesis 17, verse 15. And Elohim said to Abraham, for Sarai your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. And I will bless her and give you a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her, and she shall be the mother of nations. Kings of people shall be from her. So it says here, which is an interesting wording, because he just finished discussing the seed that was supposed to come after Abraham. And then he makes a statement, and he gets specific. I will bless her, verse 16. I will bless her and give you a son also by her. So give you a son also by her. This is referring to Isaac. But wasn't he already talking about Isaac in the earlier passages? Wasn't he already talking about Isaac? Let's look at why did Yah have to reiterate this? Where did he first initially give this promise? He gave this initial promise in Genesis chapter 12. So let's take a look at Genesis chapter 12, and we're going to look at the first couple verses in Genesis chapter 12. It says here in verse 1 to 3, now Yah said to Abraham, get you out of your country, from your kindred, from your father's house, unto a land that I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless them that bless you and curse them that curse you, and in you shall all the families of the earth be blessed. This is why the foreigner from a different nation was able to enter in to the symbol of the covenant that was made to Abraham and his children. So Abraham and his children had this extension to the nations entering in, the sojourner, the foreigner, entering in to a covenant made with Abraham about being a part of this inheritance. So it says here that he will bless all the families of the earth. So what is the issue? What is the issue with why he has to reiterate this in in Genesis 17 when he's 99. Here in verse 4, Genesis 12, it says that he was 75 years old. So why does he have to say it again 25 years later and add a physical symbol for them to remember the covenant? Well, if we look at Genesis chapter 15, we see that there was an issue in Abraham's mind. It says here in Genesis chapter 15, verse 1 going down to verse 6. It says, after these things, the word of Yah came to Abraham in a vision, saying, do not fear, Abraham. I am your shield and your exceeding great reward. Abraham said, Yah Elohim, what will you give me, seeing that I have no child, and the steward of my house is Eleazar from Damascus? Abraham said, behold, to me you have given me no child. Lo, one born in my house is my heir. And behold, the word of Yah came to him, saying, this shall not be your heir. So what was the issue? The heir. Who was going to inherit all these promises that you gave to me? Who was going to inherit all these blessings that you gave to me? He says, this person will not be your heir, but he shall come forth out of your own bowels. That person shall be your heir. And he brought him forth and said, look now towards the sky. Tell the stars, if you are able to number them, then he shall say, so shall your seed be. And he believed in Yah, and he counted it unto him for righteousness. One interesting point I want to point out about the counting of the stars. Have Israel, the nation of Israel, the single nation of Israel, have they ever been counted? According to Scripture, there's been a record of 2 accounts in which they were counted. There was a consensus that Moses did when they left Egypt, counting the number of Israel. This was commanded by Yah in order to understand the separation, the function, and the dividing of the inheritance of the land of Canaan. And also just becoming more aware of the people, more organized. But then there was also a counting of Israel when David counted the children of Israel against the will of Yah. So there was 2 instances, one that was good, one that was bad, but there was 2 instances in which the children of Israel, or the children of Israel, which are the children of Abraham, were counted. So according to this promise, you will be unable to count the children of Israel or the children of Abraham. But the children of Abraham, according to the understanding of the children of Israel being the children of Abraham, they were counted twice historically. So what is he talking about? He's talking about how in Abraham all the families of the earth will be blessed. He's talking about him becoming the father of many nations, not just one nation. And he was allowing the foreigner, a person from another nation, to enter into the covenant that he was making with Abraham, even at this time. Even at this time. So with that being said, let's confirm a little bit about this circumcision being a sign of the promised seed. There was a promised seed that was supposed to be his heir, and it was not referring to Isaac because the children that came from Isaac and Jacob, which they both lived in the land of Canaan, but they did not possess it as their own. The heir, which is referred to, many understand as Isaac, did not inherit Canaan either. He died without inheriting Canaan, without Canaan being his possession. So we have another anomaly where the heir, the physical initial heir of Abraham, was Isaac, and he did not possess Canaan either. Matter of fact, Jacob did not possess Canaan either. So we see that there's this the fulfillment of them bearing, or the heir of him being an inheritor of this land. It did not come to life. The only thing that came to life was the understanding or a certain type of fulfillment, which was after the Israelites, of possessing this land, which is after the 40 years of the wilderness. So we see clearly that there was a broader sense of this promise. Then he said later on, call Sarai's name Sarah, and I will give you a son also by her. So if he wasn't talking about Isaac earlier in Genesis 17, in which the circumcision was a symbol pointing to, Why did he mention? So if Isaac wasn't that person, who was that? Who was that seed that was going to be the heir, that was going to bless all nations, that was going to allow Abraham to be the father of all nations? Who was that seed? Let's go to Romans. Let's first initially talk about Romans, the promises made to Abraham. What does Paul have to say about the promises in Genesis? If anybody would know in Scripture as a commentary aspect, it would be Paul. We don't necessarily have to go outside of Scripture to find commentary on Genesis 17. We can literally look at within the New Testament letters, which a lot of it is commentary of the understanding of the Torah and the prophets. So let's look at this commentary in Romans chapter 4. We're going to start from verse 1. It says, "What shall we say then? That Abraham, our father, as pertaining to the blood, have found? For if Abraham was made right by his actions, he hath to boast, but not before Elohim. Because what does the scripture say? Abraham believed Elohim, and it was counted to him for righteousness." This is referring to Genesis chapter 12. It says here, "Now to him that works is the reward not reckoned by pardon or favor, but of debt." So if a person does something, then it's not given to him by favor, it's given to him because it's owed to him. Verse 5, "But to him that works not, but believes on him that justifies the ungodly, his faith is counted for righteousness. Even David has described the blessedness of a man unto whom," this is in the book of Psalms, "unto whom Elohim imputes righteousness without works." This is what David said in verse 7. "Blessed are those whose iniquities are forgiven and whose sins are covered. Blessed is a man of whom Yah will not impute sin." So this statement of removing the sins and forgiving the iniquities is also an assumption, is an implication implying that Yah will not only forgive sins, but also impute righteousness. This is why this is directly connected. Abraham's sin was forgiven, and his belief allowed him to receive righteousness from Yah by faith. Let's continue to look at this. Verse 9 of Romans chapter 4, it says, Did this blessedness come to the circumcision only, or upon the uncircumcision also? For we say that faith was reckoned to Abraham for righteousness, right? So how was it reckoned to Abraham? When he was circumcised or uncircumcised? It was not when he was circumcised, but when he was it was not when he was circumcised, but when he was uncircumcised. This is when this promise came to him. This is when this blessedness came to him. He received the sign. Now watch this, verse 11. He received the sign of circumcision, a seal of the righteousness of the faith which he had, being uncircumcised. Did it say that circumcision was a sign of the faith that all of us has? No. It says that circumcision was given to him as a seal of the righteousness of the faith that he had while he was uncircumcised. This is why the 8-day-old child, which does not have faith, has to be circumcised to bear the covenant symbol of Abraham on him. It says that he might be the father of all them that believe. Though they be not circumcised, that righteousness might be imputed unto them also. The father of circumcision to them who are not of the circumcision only, but who also walk in the steps of that faith of our father Abraham, which he had being yet uncircumcised. I want to talk about this real quick. I'm going to try to go through this, so please take notes and go over these things. Abraham received the blessings before he would receive the token of circumcision. Now, circumcision, according to verse 11 of Romans 4, was a symbol of the faith that he had. Therefore, to place that symbol on an 8-day-old child is to place on them a physical symbol of the covenant with Abraham, so when they get older, they'll be able to see this physical symbol. Now, the 8-day-old child was not the only ones that were circumcised, but the foreigner, the person from another nation who wanted to come in and partake in certain other symbols, he also had to bear the symbol of the covenant to Abraham if he wanted to partake in a relationship with Yah. So this is quite clear. Now, verse 12 is something very important for understanding. It was saying that he is not going to be the father of those who are physically circumcised only, but he was going to be the father of those who walked in the steps of faith that were also not circumcised. Now, this is very important to understand because Messiah made it quite clear about faith and circumcision. Abraham, in John chapter 8, there were a group of men that Messiah was talking to, and they said they boasted about being the children of Abraham. And he said that you are not the children of Abraham, you are the children of the devil. And the reason why he said you are the children of the devil, he says you are not of the children of Abraham, because if you were, then you would walk like you would do the works of Abraham. Now here it says to walk in the steps of the faith of our father Abraham, which he had with when he was uncircumcised. This is what he was telling those who profess to be Abraham's blood relatives. He says, yes, you are Abraham's blood relatives, but you are of your father the devil, because you do not walk in the faith. You do not do the works of Abraham. You do not walk by faith like Abraham did, so therefore you are not Abraham's children. These were blood relatives. Messiah is telling them that though you are circumcised and blood relatives of Abraham, you are not his children because you do not walk in the faithful steps of Abraham. Let's continue to look at this. Verse 13 of Romans 4. It says, for the promise that he should be the heir of the world. Did it say Canaan? No. It didn't say Canaan. It said the world. In Hebrews chapter 11, go back and check it out. When you read Hebrews chapter 11, it indicates even more in this commentary that Abraham was not looking at Canaan to receive Canaan, but that he was looking for a heavenly kingdom, a heavenly city that was built by Yah, which we know, according to Revelation, will be the New Jerusalem and will be placed on the new earth, totally different from what we have here in the earthly. If you want to look at more instances of that, go to Hebrews chapter 11. Check out Revelation as well, referring to the new earth being created and the city being brought down to the new earth. Also, check out Galatians chapter 4, because Paul says in that commentary that there was an earthly Jerusalem that was in bondage because of the rejection of Messiah and his people. And then there was a heavenly Jerusalem that all those who believe were a part of. So check Galatians 4, Hebrews chapter 11, as well as Revelation 21 and 22. So with that being said, it says here in Romans 4:13, for the promise that he should be the heir of the world was not to Abraham or to his seed through the law or through the instruction of circumcision or any instruction, but through the righteousness of faith. For if they which are of the law, or they which do the law, or demonstrate actions, faith is made void, and the promise is of none effect. But the law works wrath. For where is no law or no understanding of the law, there is no understanding of transgression. So let's go back real quick. Let's look at verse. No, let's keep reading a little bit. Verse 16, it says, therefore it is by faith that it might be by favor or grace, to the result that the promise might be to all the seed, not to that which only is of the law or circumcised, but to that also that is of the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all. As it is written, I have made you a father of many nations. Before him whom he believed, even Elohim, who made alive the dead and called those things which be not as though they were, who against hope believed in hope, that he might become the father of many nations, according to that which was spoken, so shall your seed be. So this is very important to understand that Abraham's promise was a promise that was given to him of the seed that was going to come and cause him to fulfill that promise of being the king of many nations. Throughout the history of the Israelites, we see that our forefathers and the Israelites were not We're not, it was one nation. It was one nation, and here and there we have people from different nations joining in. But there was a greater magnitude of this promise given to Abraham, and it was to be fulfilled through his heir. And that fulfillment was not made through Isaac. Isaac did not fulfill that promise of him becoming the father of many nations. But let's continue to see. Let's go to Galatians chapter 3. Galatians chapter 3. We're going to see a little bit more about this promise to Abraham and who was that seed that was actually supposed to come and make this promise to. It says here in Galatians chapter 3, we're going to start from verse 13. Galatians chapter 3, starting from verse 13. It says, Messiah redeemed us from the curse of the Torah, he being made a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone that hangs on a tree. That the blessing of Abraham, cursed is everyone that hangs on a tree, that the blessing of Abraham might come on the nations through Yahushua the Messiah, that he might receive the promise of the Ruach through faith. Brethren, I speak after the manner of men, though it be a man's covenant, yet if it be confirmed, no man can cancel it out or add to it. Now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He said, not to seeds as of many, but as of one, to your seed, which is Messiah. It says, and this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before of Elohim in Messiah, the law, which was 430 years after, cannot cancel out that promise. It should not make that promise of none effect. So the promise that we're talking about is the one that was 430 years before Israel came out of Egypt. This was the covenant he was making with Abraham. The heir that was mentioned in Genesis chapter 15 is not referring to Isaac. This heir was referring to the Messiah. This promise was given to Abraham in the Messiah. In the Messiah. That the Messiah had to fulfill this promise, and the circumcision that was in the body of Abraham and all the children of Abraham had to bear this promise to point to the seed that was going to come to fulfill Abraham's promise. Abraham's promise. Not Israel's promise. It was to fulfill Abraham's promise. So let's look at this, right? It says here in verse 17, this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before of Elohim in Messiah, the law, which was 430 years later, cannot cancel out that promise. Neither shall it make it of none effect. If the inheritance came by the Torah, it is no more by promise, but Elohim gave it to Abraham by promise. Let's continue to look at this, right? So he's talking about Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai didn't do nothing to affect Abraham's promise. It didn't cancel it out. It didn't pause it. It continued. Abraham's promise continued through the generation, even though the Torah, or the instructions, more instructions were added to the children of Israel. And he says, why was more instructions added? It says here in verse 18 of Galatians 3, for the inheritance was if the inheritance was by the Torah, it is not by promise, but Elohim gave it to Abraham by promise. So wherefore there's the purpose of the law. It is added because of transgressions, till the seed should come to whom the promise was made. Till the seed should come to whom the promise was made. Who is that seed? Not Isaac. It is Messiah. The promise was made to Messiah. Now watch this. Let's go down, right? Let's go down here. It says here in verse 26 of Galatians 3, and you can read about the schoolmaster. So it says here, matter of fact, let's read about it so that way we won't. It says here in verse 23, it says, but before faith came, we were kept under the law, shut up until the faith which afterwards should be revealed. Now Abraham had faith, so that wasn't his issue. But there was many Israelites during the time of Sinai that did not have faith. So the law restricted them. They were kept under the condemnation of the law. The law kept revealing their guiltiness until they started to have faith and believe and walk in the righteousness, in the righteous instructions. So faith is not referring to Messiah. Faith is talking about faith. Until a person has faith, the law is constantly telling them that they need help, that they need someone to come and deliver them from sin. Look at what it says here. Verse 25. But after faith is come, we are no longer under the schoolmaster, which is the Torah. What happens? You enter into a covenant in which he takes the law and puts it in you and writes it in your mind. So you are no longer condemned by it. You now live by it. It's in you. It's a part of your character, your nature. So you don't do away with the law. You come to Yah so he can take the law from condemning you, put it inside of you to create a new person, to allow you to walk in righteousness by his spirit and by the law being written in our hearts. You can check that out in 2 Corinthians chapter 3. So let's continue to look at this. Verse 26 of Galatians 3, it says, for you are all children of Elohim by faith in Yahushua the Messiah. For as many of you as been immersed into Messiah have put on Messiah. There is no Yahudim, no Jew, nor Greek. There is neither bond nor free. There is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Yahushua the Messiah. Now watch this. And if you are Messiahs, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. If you belong to Messiah, if you believe in Messiah, if you have submitted and received Messiah, you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise that was given to Abraham in Genesis chapter 17. You become an heir of the world according to Romans chapter 4. Every promise given to Abraham was a promise given to him in Messiah, in the seed. When was the seed first promised to come? In Genesis. Remember Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, where it says the serpent, that the enmity would be between the woman and the serpent seed, and the woman and the serpent, the woman's seed and the serpent's seed, but the woman's seed will crush the head of the serpent. This promise of this seed coming to crush the serpent's head is the perpetuation of the promised seed. Isaac didn't crush the head of the serpent. The promised seed that was coming to crush the head of the serpent, according to Genesis chapter 3:15, was the Messiah. And we clearly see that the promise of circumcision points us to the Messiah. And when the Messiah came, we see that many people who have accepted the Messiah no longer bear in their body the promise made of the seed to Abraham, but it was now an understood fact that the Messiah came, and in the reality of the Messiah, Abraham's faith, which was demonstrated when he was uncircumcised, was now allowing that faith to bless the nations in Messiah. And we see this example, Timothy. Many people will bring up that Timothy was circumcised. Let's look at why Timothy was circumcised. Acts chapter 16. So Acts chapter 16, verse 1 to 5, it tells us why Timothy was circumcised. It says, then came he to Derbe and Lystra, and behold, there were certain disciples that was there, named Timothy, the son of a certain woman, which was a Jew, and believed, but his father was a Greek, which was well reported by the brethren that were in Lystra and Iconium. Him would Paul have to go forth with. And he took him and circumcised him because of the Jews that were in those quarters, because they knew that his father was a Greek. So did Timothy get circumcised, or did Paul circumcise Timothy because he had to? No. Timothy was already known as a believer and that walked in Yah. So he didn't get circumcised because he believed. He already believed. He got circumcised because the Jews wouldn't have listened to him if he was not circumcised. Period. He was not a Jew. He was a Greek because his father was a Greek. And because his father was a Greek, he got circumcised so the Jews would listen to him. That is not a demonstration of faith. That is a demonstration of purpose. Timothy was sacrificing his physical comfort in order to reach out to those who wouldn't listen to him otherwise. Let's look at Titus, right? Galatians chapter 2 talks about Titus. Titus, of course, being a Greek name. Galatians chapter 2, right, verse 3 to 8, it says, but neither Titus, who was with me, being a Greek, was compelled to be circumcised. And that because of false brethren unaware brought in, who came in secretly to spy out our freedom, which we have in Yahushua Messiah, that they might bring us into bondage. Now, The law of Yah is not bondage. The instruction of circumcision is not bondage. But the idea that Yah won't receive you unless you perform this circumcision is a pagan mentality, that I need to appease Yah with an action, so my actions can appease Yah's anger. No, absolutely not. It's faith that Yah is always asked for. So it says here that Titus wasn't compelled to be circumcised, even though people were coming in saying that you had to do this. Now, Titus was a man of Yah, and he was a Greek, and he was not compelled. Now, if this is an instruction that is not just pointing to Messiah like a sacrifice was, it wasn't pointed to Messiah. If this was an instruction that he had to perform, he would have been compelled by the Ruach or the Spirit to do it. Period. But he was not compelled because it was not an action that needed to be necessary at this time after Messiah's coming. Because the promise to Abraham was pointing to the seed that was to come, which was Messiah. Here's another interesting fact before we close. Acts chapter 20. We have Paul going through these Greek nations, right? So he went through these Greek nations, and one of these Greek nations, we see in verse 4 how he was traveling, right? It says, and there accompanied him into Asia, so Peter of Berea, and of the Thessalonians, Aristarchus, Secundus, pardon my mispronunciation, Gaius of Derbe, and Timotheus, we know he's Greek, of Asia, Tychicus, Trophimus, these going through tarried with us at Troas. He's going through all the Greek nations, right? And it says, we sailed from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread. So he stayed at Philippi for the days of unleavened bread, and came unto him at Troas in 5 days, where we abode 7 days. So he went to Philippi, stayed there for unleavened bread, and then left afterwards. So he observed unleavened bread in Philippi, not in Jerusalem, in Philippi with the Greeks. You know, so there was not this emphasis that Paul was given saying, hey, go and get circumcised in order to be here and observe Feast of Unleavened Bread. No, there was no emphasis of that. Matter of fact, if this was necessary, even at this time, Paul himself would have been the one not to allow anyone to go against this issue. There were many issues, such as eating food that was strangled, eating fluid with the blood, fornication. These are issues that he addressed, and they addressed with the Torah in Acts chapter 15. These were all scriptures, all commands made from the Torah. Don't eat anything with blood. And this is Paul confirmed these things. So now, why would Paul not confirm circumcision? Because circumcision is something different. Is a promise, is a token for Abraham, to point to being the children of Abraham, to point to the child, the heir that was supposed to come to fulfill Abraham's promise. And the Messiah fulfilled that promise. So I hope that understanding of circumcision was clear. Please give me an email if there's anything that I may be missing, anything that I haven't covered. We would love to cover it in a video. Please subscribe to this video, share this video. We'll be waiting. Don't hesitate to send any questions. We hope that you guys were blessed, and we hope that you guys receive clarity and understanding from the scripture study. Thank you for joining our class again. I'm Jadiel from the Fourth Angels Learning Center, and you guys have a blessed day.